Welcome to the Roboticist Chronicles, an ARC Specialties podcast, where we get into the nuts and bolts of robots, automation, and the implications of an evolving machine workforce.
Hello, this is Dan Alford with ARC Specialties. You're listening to the Roboticist Chronicles. We're recording this episode in Chicago at Fab Tech. This is 2023. This is our big welding show every year, and I've got a very special guest. Sam Kiser, friend and mentor, is up here because he always shows up for these shows. And this year is something unique. Sam won the Laurence Savage Award.
For sure.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Dan. And
Watch him.
It's kind of so cute. You asked once before how you win a Warren F. Savage Award.
Yeah, I've never won one.
Well, if you keep struggling around, you'll probably find a way to do it. Basically, it's an award for the best paper of a particular year in the Welding Journal, in the research supplement, and it's for someone who has discovered something brand new and brings a lot of value to the welding community.
And what was your invention?
Well, our invention is the Inconel 52 MSS TA. And when I first started, we've been working on this product for before 2000. And we have had 4 renditions. The last one is 52 MSS TA.
Is that tantalum?
As in tantalum.
So what are you doing putting tantalum in a nickel alloy?
Terribly expensive. It's the only way to get rid of niobium. And niobium, in the presence of iron in this nickel alloy, causes hot cracking or causes solidification cracking susceptibility. And so what we had to do is we had to find an element to substitute for niobium as a carbide former and as one that is a great big atom so that it prevents the formation of Laurence phase.
It's pretty obvious when you...
When you get right down to it. Well, actually, it only took us about 23 years.
Really? You've been working on it that long?
Well, we didn't know we were working on 52 MSSTA at the time. We were working on a material that would give us, well, it starts out way before that in PWSCC resistance, primary water stress corrosion cracking resistance. We found you had to have 30% chrome instead of 15% chrome that was in Inconel 600. So when you add that much chromium, you reduce the solubility for all these other elements. So now you got to make room for them somehow or another by changing them from big ones to little ones and to different materials. So basically we came up to the point where we had everything pretty well in place until we discovered that we had ductility dip cracking. And I'd like to mention my friend and probably your friend, he's a fellow Houstonian, Nathan Nisley, who created the strain to fracture test that allows us to differentiate between ductility dip cracking and solidification cracking. So once we had that differentiation, now we can go study one or go study the other one.
Fix the right problem.
Right, exactly. But actually we had both of those problems. So back in the day when we added niobium and about 0.03 carbon to form an array of finely divided, just the right size niobium carbides to give you crooked grain boundaries. And the crooked grain boundaries are what gives you resistance to ductility dip cracking. But once we did that, then we found that niobium plus iron gives us Laurence phase, which gives us solidification crack. It's kind of like a water balloon, you know. You squeeze it here, it pops out over there.
But you solved it. Sounds like you've been doing this a while. Rewind to the beginning. You're not even a metallurgist, are you?
No, I'm a mechanical engineer with metallurgist tendencies.
When did you graduate college?
I graduated college in 1969.
69.
University of Cincinnati, and you would have thought they didn't know anything about metallurgy. They're not like Ohio State or the big names or anything, but we do have a pretty good program. It was darn tough.
And when did you go to work for Inco?
I started work for Inco in 1963.
Before you graduated?
Oh yeah, I was a summer student, and then I was a cooperative student, and I worked for them all the way. It adds up to 60 years.
60 years?
60 years, yep.
Yeah, when are you going to retire?
Soon. I know that's a shock to you.
No, I don't believe it. I think you should just cut back to 6 days a week.
Thanks for that, but I think it's time to go look for some other things to do.
Well, I hope you still answer your phone, because I still have nickel problems, and you're my first line of defense.
Listen, I said to somebody else earlier today that most of the good things that ever happened to me while I was trying to help somebody. And I've just loved helping people. And so that's one reason why I like my job so well. Aside from tweaking alloys and so forth and making welding products, but I do technical support for our company, for all of our alloys, Monels, nickels, Inconels, and so forth. Anybody that has a welding problem, come to me. So I enjoy fixing them. It's
going to be tough to replace 60 years of experience. Whenever I call you with a problem, you'll give me a story from back in the 70s where you already fixed this long ago. That's what we call analogous thinking. But
okay.
So you've already done it all.
Well, maybe not all of it, but quite a bit.
So why'd you get into metallurgy? You're supposed to be doing mechanical engineering. What's the deal?
Metallurgy is just so logical, and it's such a wonderful topic. I believe that the Lord made everything. He made the creation, and He made it all fit together, like so. And all of the elements, we've only named the elements in about the last 300 years.
Right, and we're still making new ones.
That's right, too. We didn't even know what they were. But, nickel took Axel Kronstadt forever to figure out what nickel was. They thought it was this or that or something. But the guy that made the periodic table, he helped everybody get organized. Yep. And when he got several of them in there, he'd say, there ought to be something right there.
And there was.
And it was nickel, somewhere around 1600, I think, or something. Anyway, it's all logical. It all makes sense. It all fits together. The alloying types and what they do. For instance, you can start with nickel, and you can put in a little bit of copper, and you have Monel.
Monel, which is useful in marine applications.
Since the year 1902, it was named after one of the Inco originators, Ambrose Monel. He was
I did not know that.
A president. Anyway, and it's still active. It was the original stainless steel material, because it didn't rust, didn't corrode, didn't do much of anything. But anyway, it sufficed until we learned how to do it less expensively with the stainless steels. But you take a stainless steel, you take a nickel alloy, put a little bit of molybdenum in it, and it gives you pitting resistance, and it gives you crevice corrosion resistance, so that it works in those kind of situations where you've got a washer or a gasket or something like that. That's where a perfect place for crevice corrosion to occur. So that's where you need a molybdenum bearing alloy. Chromium gives you resistance to oxidation and to I was thinking about the kind of resistance to oxidizing acids. That's what I was thinking of. So that's what chromium does. The more you put in, the more resistance you have. But the more you put in, the less room you have for other things. So you got to choose your alloys and your amounts carefully. But anyway, that's kind of like the situation I started to say about the 52 MSSTA. We started out with Inconel 82. Man, it was good. It was good at everything except it would stress corrosion crack a little bit. So had to increase the chromium. So then we had to change other things to make room for other materials. And then what would happen is you get into hot cracking situations. So you have to now make room for other things or change materials, change alloying elements. But we're kind of going down a pretty deep rabbit hole here.
Okay, back up to Inco.
Yeah,
okay.
Inco.
Well, What is the meteorite story true?
Yes, it is.
Please tell the meteorite story.
The way that actually Inco got started long after they discovered the meteor, the pit. There's a huge crater in Canada, in the area of Sudbury, Ontario, and our company got started there. We formed Inco Alloys, International Nickel Company, formed in about 1902. They kind of had trouble getting started because nobody knew what nickel was. Nobody knew what to do with it, and till we come to World War I, and they found out that, boy, nickel in steel makes armor-piercing plate. And you put those on your boats, you put them on your tanks, you put them wherever you want protection from a projectile.
Bulletproof.
Pardon
Makes
me?
it bulletproof.
Yes, well, more or less.
More bulletproof.
Yeah, and but then after World War I, the demand for nickel plummeted. So they struggled to stay alive and keep going, and then they discovered some things they could do with it. They discovered that pure nickel makes an excellent laundry alloy. So it was first used in laundry equipment, laundry, and so
For corrosion resistance.
Exactly, yeah. They put in bleach and all those things. So the next thing that happens is that they start to build a little bit of business, some international business, and they eventually say, we should do some research into what we can do with nickel. And so in 1922, they set aside $3 million. Now that's $3 million back then.
Yeah.
So probably,
30 or
probably
more?
300 or
Okay.
so. But anyway, and they built this little plant in Huntington, West Virginia. Nobody ever heard of Huntington, this little podunk place. They did it for three reasons. Low sulfur natural gas, because they found that sulfur poisons nickel pretty quick. Low sulfur natural gas. It's the confluence of the Guyandotte and the Ohio rivers for the good barge transportation. Back then the highways were not much.
Right.
So on the shipment, and they had a good source of low cost labor. A lot of these poor farmers didn't make much. They probably raised potatoes, I'll bet. And so
I know a few metallurgists that still do.
do you? Yeah. Those three reasons is why they chose Huntington, West Virginia, and so they started by making an alloy creation location. Actually, they started making A nickel and B monel. Those were the two major alloys. But then they started hiring metallurgists and who would add foo-foo dust to do melts and so forth, and they started creating alloys. And that really opened.
So where's the meteorite?
Oh, the meteorite.
I got to hear it.
Yeah, got to keep bringing me back. Actually, what happened was shortly, I think it was probably before 1910, I think, they bought the properties in Canada that included this elongated elliptical, maybe 15 or 20 miles long and 5 miles wide, and maybe not a half a mile, but deep, that you can just imagine this big meteorite came in and slammed into the earth.
Oh, and skipped off?
Pardon me?
Did it stick or did it skip off?
Well, I don't know that we know what happened to it. It might have burnt out, but what was important, it left traces all around the rim of that area. And then down in the bottom, they found quite a bit of nickel. So all of it was a nickel-rich meteorite that landed in Sudbury, Canada. And that was the major beginning of the nickel company, Inco. And Inco's odd. All you have to do is, if you want something to change, all you got to do is just sit and watch. I started working for Inco. I started working for Inco Alloys International. It was Inco first, International Nickel Company, and then our group became Inco Alloys International, and then we became, other things, special metals.
Now you're special metals.
Yeah, but the basic thing is that none of that exists anymore. We are now Precision Cast Parts Corporation, big outfit out on the West Coast.
There's who owns you guys?
That's in. It's
Yeah.
Precision Cast Parts. And, basically...
And who owns PCC?
That's a good question. I don't know. Probably the shareholders.
I thought it was Berkshire.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for that. I knew you'd be good for something along the way.
So, you work for Mr. Warren Buffett.
Mr. Warren Buffett, right?
Is that good?
And he's the brains behind all the money. So that's how he came to own all of it. But yeah.
So, I hope some of our audience is young. Would you recommend to them they get into this field?
Oh my. Well, I would say there's so many young people that I've talked to, that I've counseled with, and they do great in math and science in high school. And I say, man, keep it up. That's the thing to do. Go that way. And so sometimes they come back and say, well, I decided to go into nursing, or I decided,
Hey, we need those too.
I decided to go teaching, or I decided, and it's always a disappointment, but that's what they were following their dream. But I try to encourage them, if you like math, if you enjoy math, you can use math in any of the sciences. And the best thing to do is to pick a science that you like, whether it's be rock hounding, or whether it's alloys, or whether it's what it might be. But then adapt your math to that and pursue it and to keep going. And the way patents happen is somebody has got in a groove and they've kept going and going, solving problems all the way down till you get to the essence of the real problem, like solidification cracking or ductility dip cracking, and then you figure out how to do it. Somebody famous once said, the way to be successful is to bite off more than you can chew and then chew it.
Figure out how to chew it.
So that's the key, and I would recommend anybody, young people, to come along and study welding and metallurgy and other scientific things that you might enjoy, especially as you can apply mathematics to it.
Now, you guys actually can predict the effect of alloying elements nowadays.
Oh, absolutely.
That's just astounding to me. You can predict an alloy that doesn't exist.
Yeah, there are tremendous modeling programs.
Right.
I guess modeling is what you call it. But basically, that's how you do optimization problems. If you have an alloy, for instance, all of the C alloys, or the 600 type alloys that have chromium and molybdenum in them, they have come about by trying this much chrome and this much moly in this application. But it was there last week, but it's gone now. So I got to add more something. And you analyze the sample under the microscope, and you say, it's failed by pitting, I need more moly.
Yep.
Or, it's failed by oxidation, I need more chromium. Once you know the various applications of the various elements and what they do in the nickel matrix, then you got a pretty good idea of how to adjust them once you find failure mechanisms. And all of that is built on your ability to look at logical problems and logical solutions. And you have to have the background. The computers that we have are fabulous for holding on to all the information. So you can actually do modeling with those computers that have the basics of the information, of what each element does. But tantalum was the real trick. In fact, if I might, the way we talk about this 52 MSSTA, if you go all the way back to the beginning, we first talked about PWSCC, primary water stress corrosion cracking. So eventually we knew that we had to add chromium. Once we added chromium, you see, I think of a series of window frames, and you have their constrictors, like for instance, one might be hot cracking or solidification cracking, one might be corrosion, one might be strength, And so you try to make an alloy that will fit through that window. But if it's weak, the window closes up. So you got to do a stronger alloy. You got to make the adjustments. And so the first window was PWSCC. The second window was ductility dip cracking. So we had to, this thing closed down some more. So you had to figure your way around that. And then we had solidification cracking. So then we had to get that worked out so that you just solve a series of problems as you go along, and pretty soon you come up with something nobody ever thought of.
And you win a paper.
Yeah, well, sure, and you might even win a prize.
Yeah.
The other thing is, though, that at first I would never have thought about adding tantalum to the alloy because it's so expensive. It's impractical.
$200 a pound.
Used to be. It's probably more than that by now. But most of the other elements, nickel is notoriously between $3 and $6 or so.
But iron is down below $1.
Yeah, iron is virtually.
That's why the world's made out of iron and steel.
Exactly. And then they paint it to keep it from rusting.
Yeah, keep it from rusting if they don't talk to you.
Exactly. But the whole point of it is don't be limited by what you think may be a false constricture. In the case of tantalum, it closed the window like that because of cost. But it really didn't, because we only needed about 3.5% tantalum.
Not much.
So we could substitute that for the niobium, and that eliminates the lavase phase, which was creating problems with the solidification cracking. So that's kind of a lesson.
So was this your most interesting project, or you got a story from yesteryear?
This one was a pretty good story, but actually, the one about the crooked grain boundaries was in the same alloy, but that was a real trick. I mean, for the longest time, they called any cracking that you had in an austenitic alloy, they called it, what did they call it? They called it one thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And they didn't know, all that time, they didn't know that they were looking at ductility dip cracking or solidification cracking. Solidification cracking happens when you have a liquid phase present and stress.
Because the tensile strength of a liquid is zero.
But in ductility dip cracking, it's solid state. So, everything solidifies without any cracks, but then by the shrinkage stresses, you can actually have cracking in the thing as you go. And some people have cracking with 625. And we're working on a project right now to make 625 more resistant to cracking.
I sure would appreciate that.
Yeah.
since we burn about it.
But can you imagine anybody paying for 3% tantalum added to 625?
In the oil field, they will.
Well,
we're working on drill rigs that are $1 million a day. Yeah. So all of a sudden, some $300 tantalum doesn't look all that expensive.
Yeah, I guess. And especially if you can solve a problem that's costing millions of dollars anyway.
And prevent an oil spill.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, to answer the question, all of them are exciting and interesting when you get into the heat of battle. You're trying to figure out.
That's why I enjoy the oil field. We're up against temperatures, pressures, and corrosivity that we don't have the materials to solve.
Exactly.
So the next generation's got a wonderful task ahead of them.
Inconel filler metal 680 has got to be somewhere in the future.
That's going to help, but then even if that fixes today's problems, tomorrow's problems are unsolved.
In fact, what we'll have to look at, I can remember a long time ago, we created an alloy for the aerospace industry that was hardenable by precipitation hardening, by diffusion hardening, and by just solid solution hardening. And so the more tools you have to go at a particular problem, the more likely are you to find a solution. So I've thought about some of those kind of things for 680 and for 680 as welded is about 130,000 tensile. 625 is about 115,000. And like you said, what are we going to do next?
Yeah, right.
So we'll need something more than that. And so what we need are age-hardened properties in the as-welded condition. That's the real trick.
Age hardening as welded.
And you can get that, in multi-pass welds. You get a little bit of heat input with each subsequent pass. So that's a direction you could go in.
Because some structures are too big to heat treat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, and some of them, you put it in and you're going to heat treat it, and it sags in the heat treatment.
Right.
So you lost all your dimensions. So
you oxidize the surface, you decarburize it, something.
Lots of problems. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So if you could go way back to the 60s when you're young and impressionable, and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
I appreciate that as a question. I'm not sure that I was ever impressionable. I can't remember having been young, but I sure did make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of dumb things. And I guess what I would say would learn to deny yourself early. Deny your selfish urges and all of the things that you want to do for self-gratification. Learn how to control that.
Interesting. I've never heard that one. I ask everybody. But.
Well, that's what my problem was, and I suspect other people had that problem as well. And I praise the Lord that I have found that it's possible to do that. Back then, I didn't think you could.
Well, see, now you say your greatest joy is helping others.
It is.
So you've gone full circle. You went from
self
to others. Well, good for you. That's great advice.
And and to have a reward like you get from helping others that you weren't even looking for. I mean, that's the kind of thing that our Lord does. He rewards you for things that you didn't even intend. You're just trying to help somebody, and He dumps it on you some more.
Sounds like karma to me.
Sounds like what?
Karma. You do good, good things will happen.
Well,
I would have told
karma.
Karma, yeah. I would have told myself, don't worry, it's going to be okay.
Well, that's pretty good, except sometimes you go over the edge and you cost your life.
It's not okay.
I mean, some of these folks that get into drugs. Oh, that's another thing. Praise the Lord that I never got into drugs, but boy, you want to stay away from drugs. I mean, they get a hold of you and they drag you down, and
they distract you from having a real purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
I don't have time for it.
Well, that's true, and I appreciate that about you. You're always going forward. And the other thing I'd say too, if you ever come to this guy's shop, you'll see that he has toys all around the shop.
Those aren't toys, those are projects in process.
He's playing with everything. He was telling me about his rail gun the other day.
That's a secret.
What's a rail gun? Anyway, don't forget to have fun.
Absolutely.
You're going.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. And whatever your specialty, maybe you can have fun doing that. And that's the key, I think, to a successful job and a successful career, is if you enjoy doing what you're doing and you're helping somebody at the same time. What could be better?
And live within your harvest.
My father was famous third grade educated philosopher. He said, spend less than you make.
That same thing.
That's what he said.
Yep.
Yeah. Live within your means.
Live within your harvest.
Exactly.
All right, what do we forget?
I'll look at my list.
We can get you back on, but
okay.
But here we are up in Chicago.
Yep. I don't think we forgot anything.
All right, well.
But if something else comes up, I'll come and look you up.
Come to Houston.
I've enjoyed every trip to Houston I've ever made, and most of them I come and visit you. But this guy's got a fantastic shop and lab combined, and I recommend you come and see him. And I remember, just now thought of his mantra. His mantra is, bring us your problems. We thrive on problems.
Yeah, you're close. We thrive on problems. Bring us yours.
Good.
But thank you for all the years of advice and help and for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.